What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at 5 of the most lopsided NBA Finals matchups of all time. When we talk about lopsided matchups, we talk about matchups where one team was just significantly better than their opponent to the point where it was basically unfair for the other team and they basically had no chance of winning the NBA Finals. For whatever reason, these teams could be more talented, have better offenses, better defenses, better coaching, and so on, and that's the reason there's such a big gap between a lot of these teams. I'm going to be taking a look at the talent disparity and the overall gap between the teams' records and their skill set in terms of offensive and defensive rating. So without further ado, starting off this list at number 5, we have the 1999 NBA Finals featuring the San Antonio Spurs and the New York Knicks. This was a lockout season that started because owners wanted changes to the salary cap, but players didn't exactly agree with that. The season ended up only being 50 games, with the Spurs being the 1 seed in the West and the Knicks being the 8th seed in the East. Tim Duncan was already a well-established star in the league in only his second season, having made All-NBA First Team and All-Defensive First Team that same year. The Bulls were disbanded, and the East lacked any significant title threats as well. The Spurs ended the regular season with the best record in the league of 37-13, which, when you adjust to a regular 82-game season, is 61 wins, while the Knicks went 27-23, which adjusted for 40 wins in a regular NBA season. The Spurs had a strong roster and a well-run system with stars in Tim Duncan and David Robinson, and solid support from guys like Steve Kerr and Avery Johnson. The Spurs had the best SRS in the league of 7.12 and the best defensive rating of 95 as well. They faced no competition in the Western Conference and cruised to the NBA Finals, losing only 1 game on the way there. Meanwhile, the Knicks had the 26th worst offensive rating in the league, but they were the 4th ranked defensive rating as well. The Knicks were the 8th seed during all of this, believe it or not, and they somehow ended up upsetting the 1st seed of Miami Heat in a tough 5-game series. They ended up sweeping the Hawks in the second round, and then they defeated Reggie Miller and the Pacers in 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. Unfortunately for the Knicks, Patrick Ewing tore his Achilles in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and they were without their franchise player for the remainder of the playoffs and the finals. They pretty much only had 2 key scoring threats in Latrell Sprewell and Allen Houston. Larry Johnson and Marcus Camby were solid scoring options in the conference finals, but their overall scoring numbers dropped a bit once they faced San Antonio's Twin Towers. Without Ewing and the suffocating interior defense of Duncan and Robinson, the Knicks had basically no chance in these finals. Duncan averaged 27 points, 14 rebounds, and 2 blocks, while Robinson averaged 17 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 blocks. Sprewell averaged 26 points and 7 rebounds, while Allen Houston averaged 22 points per game. Neither of them were very efficient in this series, and they hardly had any help. The Spurs dispatched the Knicks in 5 games, clinching their first title in franchise history. The Knicks had absolutely no chance of winning this series, especially without Ewing, and even with the 36-year-old Patrick Ewing, I don't think they would have had much of a chance. This was a really lopsided finals that pretty much would have taken a miracle for the Knicks to win. Coming in at number 4, we have the 2007 NBA Finals featuring the Cleveland Cavaliers and the San Antonio Spurs. At this time in the league, the East was pretty weak, but it was starting to get a bit better. The defending champion Miami Heat had gotten swept in the first round as a 4 seed, the Pistons were still good, and it was basically only the Cavs with a young LeBron that were making noise in the East. The Cavs were a 50-win team that had gotten the 2nd seed in the East behind the Pistons. In the West, the Spurs were the 3rd seed with 58 wins. They had an SRS of 8.35, a top 5 offensive rating, and a top 2 defensive rating in the league. The Spurs had a lot of talent with 3 future Hall of Famers on their roster in Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker. They also had some solid role guys like Robert Horry and Bruce Bowen, accompanied by one of the greatest coaches ever, Greg Popovich. Meanwhile, the Cavs weren't so talented. Outside of LeBron, this Cavs team just wasn't good at all. They had some decent role guys, but it's basically just LeBron and some nobodies. This team was pretty good defensively though, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons they even got as far as they did. Compared to the rest of the East, they were pretty good, but compared to the West, they had basically no chance. In the playoffs, the Spurs got to the Western Conference Finals after a controversial Robert Horry hip check on Steve Nash in Game 4 of the second round that arguably cost Phoenix their best shot at winning a title. The Spurs cruised past the Jazz in the conference finals. Meanwhile, the Cavs didn't struggle too much in the East either, sweeping the Wizards, taking care of the Nets, then taking down the once juggernaut Detroit Pistons in 6 games, behind some heroics from a 22-year-old LeBron James. Now we get to the NBA Finals. Let's just get it out of the way. The Cavs had absolutely no chance of winning this series, but they did make it close, and they made the Spurs work for a lot of these games, even though they got swept. The series was a lot closer than people remember it to be. The Spurs only won games 3 and 4 by a combined 4 points, and the other games weren't really blowouts either. LeBron was pretty inefficient this series, but he didn't really get a lot of flack for it since it was already a huge accomplishment that he even made it to the finals in the first place. LeBron averaged a measly 22 points on 36% shooting in this series, with 20% from 3 and 69% from the line. The next highest scorers on the Cavs combined for only 23 points per game. I think the Cavs defense gave the Spurs trouble a bit offensively, but the Cavs just didn't have enough consistent scoring threats outside of LeBron. This is one of the closest sweeps in NBA history most likely, but it's considered to be an overall underwhelming finals since the Cavs were just completely outmatched. I only placed it this low because the games were still close. The Spurs didn't straight up destroy them in this series like some other of the teams on this list. Everyone knew the Cavs had no chance, so really, getting to the finals was their biggest achievement anyways. Coming in at third on this list, we have the 2018 NBA Finals, or better known as Cavs vs. Warriors Part 4. This is one of the most recent, so I probably won't go too crazy in detail about the state of the league. The Warriors were the defending champions and were expected to dominate the entire regular season. They had a lot of injuries during the regular season, and the dominance of the Houston Rockets resulted in the Warriors being the second seed in the West with 58 wins. They had the third best offensive rating in the regular season and only the 11th ranked defensive rating. Questions were raised about the Warriors going to the playoffs, especially Curry being injured, but they dominated all the way up until the conference finals. On the other side, the Cavs had their usual regular season struggles and ended up trading half their team mainly due to chemistry issues. They won 50 games and were one of the worst defensive teams in the league. Pretty much everyone doubted them, but LeBron willed them through the playoffs. After 2 tough 7-game series and a sweep with the Raptors, the Cavs once again made the finals on the back of LeBron James. This was the first time the East felt like LeBron would be beat, but no other team really had a good enough chance in the Eastern Conference. In the West, Golden State just barely got past Houston with some injuries for both teams, but notably Chris Paul and Andre Iguodala having missed multiple games in that series. We were geared up for Cavs Warriors Part 4, but this time everyone knew there was basically no chance that the Cavs could win this one, especially without Kyrie. The Warriors opened this series with insane minus 900 odds to win the finals, while the Cavs were considered massive underdogs. Taking a look at rosters, obviously the Warriors were insanely stacked with 4 All-Stars and a solid group of role players and a great coach. The Cavs only had LeBron and Kevin Love as All-Stars, and the rest of the supporting cast were decent but not completely trash. I'll just cut to the chase. We all know about the J.R. Smith situation. The Cavs lost a tight Game 1 despite LeBron playing one of the greatest individual games ever, got blown out in Game 2, lost a tight Game 3, and then they straight up quit in Game 4. This was an insanely lopsided finals, and honestly, I don't even think Golden State played that well. The Cavs just had no chance, so it didn't really even matter. The Cavs were morally defeated after Game 1, and the Warriors just chewed them up and spat them out. I only put this ahead of 2007 because of how stacked the Warriors were and how undermanned the Cavs were in comparison. The once great rivalry ended with Golden State ushering LeBron out of Cleveland completely. As great as LeBron is, he just didn't have enough help against 2 MVPs and 2 more All-Stars in their primes on one team. Coming in at number 2, we have the 2002 NBA Finals featuring the Los Angeles Lakers and the New Jersey Nets. Now, this was at a time where the Eastern Conference was insanely weak, probably the weakest East in decades, and they just needed a team in the finals because that's how the finals and playoffs were set up. Really, any team that made the finals in the East were about to get curb stomped by the West, and that's more or less what happened to the New Jersey Nets. The Nets had a decent roster with a few notable names like Jason Kidd, Kenyon Martin, and a rookie Richard Jefferson. The team was first in defensive rating that season, but they had pretty average offensive rating to say the least. They had the best record in the East with 52 wins, and Jason Kidd finished second in MVP voting. In the West, the Lakers were the 3rd seed coming off back-to-back championships. Kobe and Shaq were still dominating, and the Lakers managed to win 58 games in the West. The Lakers obviously had 2 superstars in Kobe and Shaq, but they also had solid pieces like Robert Horry, Mitch Richmond, Rick Fox, and Derek Fisher. This Lakers team had the 2nd best offensive rating in the league, and they were primed for a deep playoff run. Speaking of the playoffs, the Lakers had very little trouble getting into the conference finals that year, losing only 1 game to the Spurs in the 2nd round. The conference finals is where a bunch of controversy arose. This is the infamous King series where the Lakers barely got by. It took a last-second clutch shot by Robert Horry in Game 4, some controversial officiating in Game 6, and overtime in Game 7 for the Lakers to keep their three-peat dreams alive. A lot of people argue the Kings should have won this series, and I have no doubt they would have won the finals if they beat the Lakers. In the East, there weren't any serious threats to the Nets other than a back and forth between an aging Reggie Miller and the Pacers. The Nets beat the Hornets in the second round and the Celtics in the conference finals to advance to the NBA Finals. From here, they just got totally outmatched. The games were closer than they probably should have been, but the Nets just couldn't stop Kobe and Shaq. Shaq averaged an insane 36 points and 12 rebounds, while Kobe averaged 26 points with 6 assists and 5 rebounds. Jason Kidd and Kenyon Martin averaged 43 points combined for the Nets. They just got very little contributions from the rest of the roster. These Nets just weren't good enough to really challenge the West, and they got swept by the Lakers. I put this matchup this high mainly because the East just sucked at the time, and whoever got out of the West would have won the title regardless of who came out of the East. So for that reason, I have the 2002 NBA Finals as second on this list. Coming in at number 1, we have the 1971 NBA Finals featuring the Milwaukee Bucks and the Baltimore Bullets. The Bucks were a pretty new team that year, but they managed to get Kareem with the first pick in the 1969 NBA Draft, which helped set their franchise in a winning direction right away. There were only 17 teams in total in the league, and the Bucks had the best record in the entire league with 66 wins. Kareem was the MVP of the league this year, and they also had Oscar Robertson too. This Bucks team was so good that they managed to go on a 16-game win streak and a 20-game win streak in the same season. They were so good that they had 14 more wins than the team with the second best record in the league. Meanwhile, in the East, the Bullets only won 42 games, but the East was so weak that that was good enough for the second seed in the East. This Bullets team were led by Wes Unseld, Earl Monroe, and Gus Johnson. They had an above-average offensive rating and an above-average defensive rating. The playoffs only had 3 rounds in this format with 4 teams in each conference. The Bucks just obliterated the first 2 rounds and only lost 1 game in each round, whereas the Bullets got taken to 7 games in the first 2 rounds before the eventual NBA Finals. The Bucks were significantly better than the Bullets in every single facet. Kareem averaged 27 points and 19 rebounds, Big O averaged 24 points and 10 assists, and their third option on the team averaged 20 points and 10 rebounds. No one on the Bullets averaged more than 20 points, and while some of the games were kinda close, the Bucks were just straight up better. The Bucks swept the Bullets en route to their first title in franchise history. I put this at number 1 mainly because Milwaukee was one of the greatest teams ever, while their opponent was a 42-win team that had no real business being in the NBA Finals. But since the East was so horrible, they managed to make it. This is definitely without a doubt the most lopsided NBA Finals matchup of all time. That's gonna do it for this one, guys. Anything surprise you on this list? Comment your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Just in case the party gets rowdy, I brought my crew. I don't mind if y'all wanna fight me, just don't shoot. I see you got on all this